Miracles, an annotated edition by, what is it? It's by I can't even, I have like, I decided I wasn't doing the book today. I was going to ebook version just because I felt like reading that today. But anyways, yeah, so that's what we're doing. We're doing the Course in Miracles. And there's the Course in Miracles, the traditional book, the blue one that's been edited down. And then there's the annotated edition, and complete annotated edition, which is the version of it before it was like very much edited. This includes a lot of the notes that are connected to Helen Schumann, who is the author, the channeling author of the book as well. So we are, the last time we finished here, so we were talking a lot about different types of possession. And the minute you mention possession to people, they don't really fully understand what we're talking about here. But when you read the book and you actually go through all of the different components and the different elements, it basically talks about different types of possession, meaning that according to this, there are like four different forms of it. The first one being a kind of possession where you're possessed by the fixation or the obsession with the body. So it's almost like your own physical pleasure or your own physical mechanism. So like people who are sex addicts, people who are constantly eating or overeating, etc. That's a type of possession. It's a kind of obsession, which, you know, it's the nature or the process of it. You're pretty much possessed by. We're not talking about demonic possession there. We're just talking about like possession with the thing. And then there's the second level or second form of it, which is focused more on things, where we focus or fixate on things and being possessed by the idea of things. So the more money I have, the more stuff I have. People who have issues where they're like hoarders, they're literally possessed by the idea that they have to have those things, because without those things they don't feel a sense of value or worth. So they hoard because it's their way of essentially establishing more worth, more value, because they just don't feel it, and they get a little bit of a kick whenever they get something new or they get their hands on something. So that's what that was talking about. Then there's the third level or the third layer of possession, which is what we associate with people who are emotionally or mentally ill or suffering from some sort of condition. And that can kind of go into different models because it's not all the same. And then there was a fourth version, which had to do with like ideology or intelligence, where people who they use their intelligence to basically justify their crappy behavior or the behavior in, you know, dominating or controlling or being superior, etc. So that's where that was coming from as well. So we are on page, what page are we on? It doesn't say. I'm on section 2. So I'm on section 2, chapter 2, section 2, which is cause of separation. So I'm going to read it and then we'll kind of stop here and there and talk about more about it. Let's see. I hate it when there's hair on my screen. Okay, there it goes. It's like sometimes there's, in order to attach it, it's going to like mess with the picture. Okay, so the cause of separation. And for those of you watching or tuning in, if you have any questions regarding the material or our study group conversation or discussion, feel free to like input that in the conversation below, either you being on Instagram, on Facebook, or on YouTube. But we are doing the study group, guys. So if you're tuning in barely right now, wanting a reading, that's done. That was last hour, okay? All right, so let's go through this here. So this is the first part here. Number 2 in chapter 2, the cause of the separation. This section deals with a more fundamental misuse of knowledge referred to in the Bible as the cause of the fall or separation. There are several introductory remarks which are intended to make these explanations less fear-provoking. First, I draw your attention to a couplet from Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Be as thou wast wont to be. Be as thou was wont to be. See as thou was wont to see. So be as you want to be and see as you want to see. I think that's pretty much what it's saying. These words were said by Oberon in releasing Titania from her own errors, both of being and perceiving. These were the words which reestablished her true identity as well as her true abilities in judgment. The similarity to your release is obvious. There are also some dictionary definitions which will be helpful. Their somewhat unusual nature is due to the fact that they are not usually the first definitions listed. Nevertheless, the fact that each of them does appear in the dictionary should be reassuring. Project, verb to extend forward or out. Project is what it means. Project, noun, a plan in the mind. World, a natural grand division. We will refer later to projection as related to both mental illness and mental health. It has also been commented on that Lucifer literally projected himself from heaven. We also have observed that you make an empty shell, but cannot make nothing at all. This emptiness provides the screen for the misuse of projection. The Garden of Eden, which is described as a literal garden in the Bible, was not originally an actual garden at all. It was merely a mental state of complete need lack. Even in the literal account, it is noteworthy that the pre-separation state was essentially one in which man needed nothing. The tree of knowledge, again, an overly literal concept, as a clearly shown by the subsequent reference to eating of the fruit of the tree, is a symbolic reference to some of the misuses of knowledge referred to in the section immediately preceding this one. There is, however, considerable clarification of this concept, which must be understood before the real meaning of the detour into fear can be fully comprehended. Projection, as defined above, this refers to the verb, is a fundamental attribute of God, which he also gave to his Son. In the creation, God projected his creative ability out of himself towards the Son whom he created, and also imbued them with the same loving will to create. We have commented before on the fundamental error involved in confusing what has been created with what is being made. We have also emphasized that you have not only been fully created, but also been created perfectly. There is no emptiness in you. The next point, too, has already been made, but bears repetition here. The Son, because of his own likeness to his Creator, is creative. No child of God is capable of losing this ability, because it is inherent in what he is. Wherever projection in its appropriate sense is utilized, it always implies that some emptiness or lack of everything must exist, and that it is within your ability to put your own ideas there instead of the truth. If you will consider carefully what this entails, the following will become quite apparent. First, the assumption is implicit that what God has created can be changed by your own mind. Second, the concept has intruded that what is perfect can be rendered imperfect or wanting. Third, the belief has arisen and is tolerated that you can distort the creations of God, including yourself. Fourth, the idea has entered that since you can create yourself, the direction of your own creation is up to you. These related distortions represent a picture of what actually occurred in the separation. None of this existed before, nor does it actually exist now. The sonship was created as a natural grand division or projecting outward of God. That is why everything which he created is like him. Projection as undertaken by God was very similar to the kind of inner radiance which the children of the Father inherit from him. It is important to note that the term project outward necessarily implies that the real source of projection is internal. This is as true of the Son as of the Father. The kingdom of God, in its original connotation, included both the proper creation of the Son by God and the proper creation by the Son in his right mind. The latter required the endowment of the Son by God with free will, because all loving creation is freely given. Nothing in either of these statements implies any sort of levels, or in fact anything except one continuous line of creation in which all aspects of the same order. When the lies, I'm going to stop in a few moments because this is a lot to go through. Number 13, when the lies of the serpent were introduced, they were called lies because they were not true. When man listened, all he heard was untruth. You do not have to continue true unless you choose to do so. All of your miscreations can disappear in the well-known twinkling because they are a visual misperception. Your spiritual eye can sleep, but remember, a sleeping eye can still see. All right, I'm gonna stop there because it's a whole lot to kind of work through. So what they're talking about here and what she's referring to and what they're referencing is how creation like started, or what was the fundamental like core process of creation. And a lot of people, when they think of creation, immediately they think of the Bible. They think of like what the story in the Bible is. God was a man, an old man, who created the heaven and the earth and everything in 7 days, et cetera, et cetera. Like people, that's the first thing they think about if you're coming from a Christian background. Of course, different religious beliefs and backgrounds will actually have a different story attached to it. So that's essentially what they're talking about here, is the idea of how everything was kind of was coalesced or came into being. But that's where it gets tricky, because nothing actually exists that hasn't always existed. In other words, what we are all experiencing, what we all create, what we all learn or discover or explore or whatever, everything that exists has always existed and will always exist, because the idea is that there is nothing that has never not existed. The only thing that has changed in all of that isn't necessarily that there's a lack of, or there's the idea of nothing. It's just that the concept was introduced into the beingness of God, which we are all cells in the beingness of God. We're all cells in the body of God. But the concept was introduced of lack. It's a concept, it's an idea. It doesn't actually exist. So the moment that this idea of lack was introduced, it allowed for opportunities to come to fruition, come to being, that could essentially allow us experiences into all of creation, into eternity, etc. Think of it this way. When you think of God as all that exists, which is like hard to believe it, all that exists. Now, in order for God to explore or know itself, God had to see itself from a different vantage point. And so God created a fictional version of itself, or the idea of a separate version of itself, just for a moment to experience itself from that vantage point. And so it experiences itself from that vantage point, but then multiply that by like millions or billions, etc. That is the perspective. That is the oneness that we all are. We are all essentially one being experiencing itself from unlimited perspectives and potentials and vantage points. So we are essentially all this one being, but we're uniquely designed to experience through our unique perspective and vantage point. That is why we're here, to experience, to exist, to be unique in these different variations. And so when you think of the creation is expanding. Creation is not expanding. Nothing is expanding. We're just extending into creation. In other words, it's almost like when, like, for example, back when, people thought that like Europe was the center of the universe or whatever, and then people got into ships, they went off and explored. Oh my God, there's another continent. Oh my God, there's another place. Well, they didn't actually create the continents. They just remembered or explored them. They found them and realized that there were these other additional places. It's the same thing. We are all fundamentally explorers. We're soul explorers, exploring ourselves in the different various forms and different various fashions. So we're just expanding into creation to remember and to come to understanding ourselves from different perspectives. That's what this is essentially talking about. But everything is mimicked. Everything is kind of is repeated in the idea of God. When you think of God, God is a consciousness, and consciousness that split itself into pieces to experience itself from these different pieces. But each piece is a piece of consciousness, which again breaks itself into pieces to see itself from the different vantage point. So when you think of a tree, the tree may start off with one seed, but when the tree grows, it branches out into all these different directions. It branches and grows and evolves, and it bears fruit, and it creates more. that's what we each are. We're like a tree in the beingness of God. We're branching out and expanding into these various like mindsets and ideas and experiences, etc. And then we also create as well. It's a repeating cycle. It's a repeating process that we'll see in all of creation. All of creation is designed to basically remind you of the beginning or of the start, which there really wasn't a start, but that's what we'll call it, the beginning of the start. And so everything is a repeating like pattern. And if you pay attention, you'll notice a lot of repeating patterns with how things exist in all of creation and all of reality. Going down from like the smallest thing of like an atom, when you think of like an atom, or when you think of these structures, these small structures, you got neutrons, protons, etc. They look like small solar systems that are like going around each other. It's just, these are repeating patterns because everything has been symbolically imprinted in all of creation. So we will experience and see these repeating patterns in all of creation because it's a reminder of what is, not of something brand new. It's just a reminder of what is at the very basic level. So that's what that's about. So that's what she's talking about here. I'm actually working on a video about God because I kind of want to go into this in a much more structured and specific example. And so I actually created all these diagrams, and I'm going to kind of go into it, how God came to be and what God is and what we are all in all of that. So I've created, and I'm working on a video there that I'll put out probably in the next few weeks or so, because I still got to finish off some of the writing part of it as well. But it'll basically break it down so that we can all understand what we are and how we are connected to Source and how we are all one, but yet we are all multiple. We are all, individuals, but yet we're not. And it's all just a lie, but it really isn't a lie. It's just an idea that allows you the opportunity to experience, to see from the vantage point of, creation in all of its forms. So that's what that's about. Okay. Going back to this, number 14, one translation of the fall, a view emphasized by Mary Baker Eddy and worthy of note, is that a deep sleep fell upon Adam. While the Bible seems to regard this sleep as a kind of an aesthetic utilized for the protection of Adam during the creation of Eve, Miss Eddy was correct in emphasizing that nowhere is there any reference made to his waking up. While Christian Science is clearly incomplete, this point is much in its favor. The history of humanity in the world as you see it has not been characterized by any genuine or comprehensive reawakening or rebirth. This is impossible as long as humanity projects in the spirit of miscreation. It still remains within you to project as God projected his own spirit to you. In reality, this is your only choice because your free will was made for your own joy in creating the perfect. All fear is ultimately reducible to the basic misperception that you have the ability to usurp the power of God. It is again emphasized that you neither can nor have been able to do this. In this statement lies the real justification for your escape from fear. This is brought about by your acceptance of the atonement, which places you in a position to realize that your own errors never really occurred. I want to stop here for a second because I want to kind of share something with y'all. So one thing that I have realized that is the mechanism of God or of the creator, or of like the grand, the grand oneness of us. Whenever I am allowing myself to just be, sometimes questions will show up or questions will form inside of my mind. And when these questions form, I ask the question, I ask myself in my mind the question, or I let it exist and I acknowledge it because I genuinely want to know the answer. So if a question shows up inside of me, I will ask myself, how can this be? How can that be? How can I do this? What can be? What is this about? I just allow these questions to materialize inside of my being. When I do that and I honor that and I let it sit there and I own it because it's something that I have possessed because of the consciousness that I have and the experiences that I've had that produce the question, this is the process of the creator. If you think of God as like, think of the beginning, right? Let's just call it the beginning. In the beginning, there was consciousness, and consciousness asks itself, who am I? What am I? That's what we all do anyways, right? It's the basic level understanding. Who am I? What am I? And in the process of asking who am I or what am I, all of a sudden there was all awareness of all things, simultaneously showing itself back to God. This is what I am. So it's almost like a self-acknowledgement or a self-awareness. And so that's what happened. So the moment that the question was asked, what are we? What am I? Then the answer was given, which is, this is what we are. And then this is all that is. And so there's kind of this and that's the idea of duality. So when we think of the concept of experiencing things from different vantage points or different sides, whether it's from this perspective or that perspective, it's a dualistic perspective. It exists in both forms, and nothing takes apart anything from the other. It is allowed to exist in dualistic form. So in that moment, God existed as this question and the answer, both pieces coming together to give itself resolution, to give itself an understanding of what is. So all that has existed from that point is us continually asking the questions, what are we? What am I? What is my place in this? Why? We're always asking. And in the process of asking, we all as souls continue to expand and express in understanding the answer to our questions, even if we don't realize we're asking questions. So when I'm going throughout my day or I'm having something go on and I have a question pop up in my head, I honor the question, like, what's this about or what's that about? And I ask it. I clearly express that to the universe, and the universe always responds with the answer. It will either show me an example of the answer, it will bring someone into my life to help explain the answer to me, or I will witness the answer before me in some sort of direct experience. So it always comes. This is why, when you think of Jesus asked, asking you shall find, knocking it shall be open to you. It really is the moment you have the question and acknowledge the power and the benefit of the question, you just ask it, the answer will come to you. And I learned that a long time ago. And sometimes when I ask the question or I ask, how is this or how can that be or whatever, manifestation occurs. Things begin to show up in my life that are beyond traditional processes. We can call it magic, which you can call it a miracle, but these things show up in my life that actually help me to understand it, and it's amazing that happens. And I've been doing that since when I had my very first awakening, which was when I was a teenager. And so since then, I've never stopped asking questions. And I never feel like a question is too big for God to answer. I'm like, this is my question. I'm expecting you to answer it. And I will get the answer in some way or another, which is why I love being able to ask the question. And I think that's what all of life is us on a soul level asking questions and then experiencing the answer to our questions and understanding ourselves and knowing ourselves through the experience of that. We always think that we're producing or we're creating. We're not. We're witnessing creation. We are witnesses of creation. We're not Jehovah's Witnesses. We're just witnesses of creation. So let's call ourselves creation witnesses, okay? So we're witnessing creation, and God is a witness with us. We are experiencing because we are the part of God that is I'm the part of God that's speaking to you right now, that's communicating, that's expressing this understanding. And I'm answering the question for some of you who have asked some of the questions that I'm answering. So it's almost like a two-part thing there. You ask the question, you get the answer. And we are all reflections of the divine. We are all part of God in this way. When the deep sleep fell upon Adam, he was then in a condition to experience nightmares precisely because he was sleeping. If a light is suddenly turned on while someone is dreaming and the content of his dream is fearful, he is initially likely to interpret the light itself as part of the content of his own dream. However, as soon as he awakens, the light is correctly perceived as a release from the dream, which is no longer accorded reality. I would like to conclude with the biblical injunction, go and do thou likewise. It is quite apparent that this depends on the kind of knowledge which was not referred to by the tree of knowledge, which bore lies as fruit. The knowledge that illuminates rather than obscures is the knowledge which not only makes you free, but also shows you clearly that you are free. In other words, I'm going to use something that's going on right now to help explain this process. So right now and I'm going to get political for a second, but right now we are seeing, a lot of things happening in the country, and we have a group of people who have bought into a reality, regardless of whether the reality there's a basis in reality or basis in truth in any of that. They've bought into this kind of reality. So because of that just having those thoughts, having those ideas, having those beliefs actually produce a path of experiencing those things in some way or another. Regardless of whether they're true or not, there's something being produced from those projections, from those states of reality that these individuals hold. And so what's happening is that right now we all agreed on the soul level that the reality we exist in, the physical matrix that we exist in, is the established reality for experiencing life, creation, etc. We all on a soul level know this. We are all agents of God, experiencing in a chosen platform that we all agreed on. It's like someone asking us, what platform do y'all all want to use to share and to interact and to have relationship with each other? Then we all agreed, let's all use this platform. And so that's the platform we use. That's this physical reality. Then you have people who because of what they read or what they find or what they see or whatever, they become very much conditioned into supporting a new idea, a new series of ideas, or a new series of beliefs, a new reality. But that reality is kind of bouncing off of or existing off of the first reality or the main reality. But the main reality is a lie. The main reality, and we call it a lie because it's what it is. We are lying to ourselves that we are limited to experience as a limited being for the purpose of unique understanding and awareness. That's what it's all about. So then when you take a new lie, or when you take a new belief system that's based on untruths and put it on inside of a belief, or put it into a system that is already based on a untruth that we are not God, that we are limited, that we are separate, it's kind of like throwing a bunch of jelly beans of different color into a pile of beans of different color. It's almost like mixing in a lot of confusion, a lot of things that do not hold a lot of consistency into a reality that is already not a consistent reflection of truth or of what actually is when you're not in it. And so at that point you have a little bit of a fight happening, and people's realities are kind of fighting each other out, or there's a meshing that's happening there. And so with all of that, every single experience we have, every single expression of form, every single idea, thought, every single action, every single intent, everything that we are, our being, is essentially being, I wouldn't say tested because I don't like to use the word tested, but the closest word I can use is tested. It's being tested in the field. It's like, I have an idea, but I don't know if it'll work. Let me try it out. And so we're trying it out. And so all of us are trying out ideas from a God level. And so these people who have bought into this belief system, they're trying out ideas from that perspective. But the ideas are mixing in with other ideas that are kind of conflictive. And so at some point, we as individuals, we are going to essentially question ourselves. Like, is this authentic to who I am beyond this reality? Or is this what I'm going to accept as real, even though if I take action under this system, or if I take action within this belief system, it may still run into a bunch of walls or begin to reflect inconsistencies that just do not support its integrity. And that's what's going on here, is we have a lot of that happening with people, where people have just become very much focused on their beliefs, and they're not using their experience in this matrix to figure out what's authentic and what isn't authentic, or based on authentic core beingness of God, of ourselves before this reality. So it's kind of complicated, but everything that we're going through, we're testing it out. We're testing ourselves out in these different experiences, in these different situations. And we have to choose, am I going to be this person or that in this instance? Am I going to be this person or that in this instance? So we have a scenario playing out that is actually affecting a lot of people right now. And on a core level, you have to decide, who do I want to be in this? How do I want to be in this? Do I want to support this path, which there may be some inconsistencies that do not align with my core beingness or who I know myself to be or who I choose myself to be, but I will still buy into this or go in that direction because I choose to accept that as true.